Hi everyone, it's Shawn here with Tuned by Shawn. We're on site at DRSC Automotive, and today I'm going to go over the installation of a Haltech Nexus Rebel LS on this 67 Camaro with an LSA swap. We are going to be upgrading it from cable throttle to drive-by-wire. So Haltech provides a jumper harness for this Corvette pedal. We went with a Nick Williams throttle body. This particular car has a digital Dakota dash system, and previously it was using a Holly, and so they actually make a converter box for Haltech, so we'll be installing that as well. So we're gonna open up the Rebel LS here and kind of show you what all is included, and kind of go over some of the instructions on the installation and the things that we're gonna be doing throughout the install today. So let's get this thing opened up here. So this is the Nexus Rebel LS from Haltech. It actually weighs significantly more than other products. It feels very nice product. It's all metal, very high-end build quality. Let's go with what's in the package here. So they provide us with some ring terminals. What's a little bit different between the Rebel LS and the Nexus R3 is they have Amphenol connectors on the R3, whereas these are just using ring terminals with covers. They do provide an initial USB cable for the initial setup of the Haltech Nexus Rebel, but when the app is out, which it isn't quite out yet, you also have wireless. So you can connect wirelessly with your laptop and or your phone. Right now we can connect with our laptop, but we have to first activate it in order to connect to the Rebel LS. So if you are installing the Rebel LS ECU, we figured we'd put a comparison here of what you might be replacing. What you can see right away is obviously this is all plastic. This is all nice and metal. This weighs less than a pound, and this weighs about 2 pounds. You can see the map sensor here, and this is the map sensor on the Rebel LS. But all in all, this is what we are replacing with this. Also, what we got here is, with the Rebel LS, it comes with a full harness and a wideband, amongst other things that we're going to show you right now. So, first off, we do have the quick start guide, which allows us to go through. It gives you basic information about the harness, the pinouts, different connectors, that type of stuff for the product, which is something you're going to use during the install. I think we're going to start off with just pulling out the harness here. So this harness includes everything that you're going to need for the install. Everything is plug and play for the LS motor. The key notes here with the Rebel LS that's different than a lot of other ECUs is this is actually a PDM as well. So your ignition coils, your injectors, your one fuel pump, one fan are all powered from the ECU. So you don't need to install anything extra. We've got, this is your EV6 injector harness, which this car does, I believe, have ID 1050s. Here is the wideband. Here is the 6-pin drive-by-wire adapter that will go along with this Nick Williams throttle body. Here is our Corvette pedal, which I can show you here. Plugs in. We'll plug into the harness here. Don't have to do any wiring. More auxiliary adapter connectors. These are for extra sensors, anything that's wired into the Haltech. We'll be using this with the Dakota Digital, and there's some extra stuff that we're gonna also install for the end user, just for some fun features like flat foot shifting, and if you wanna do like rolling anti-lag or anything like that. This is a blower car, but sometimes people like to have fun. It comes with a Nexus LS 2-pin Bosch alternator harness, a T56 transmission harness adapter. For this particular car, it does have a different transmission than what is provided in the kit. So we will have to, on this particular kit, do a little bit of wiring, but we'll go over that later. Nexus LS 2-pin Yazaki alternator harness, a Rebel LS Gen 4 oil pressure sensor adapter, Gen 4 map sensor adapter harness, which we'll be using on this car, LS4 pin Delco alternator harness, and I believe that is all in the goodie bag here. So after this, we'll be going over the tools that are required for the job. The tools I want to show you here today are, obviously, they're actually really not expensive in any way. Out of all these tools, the most expensive tool that I use is about $120, but you don't need to use something like this. You can use a $15 tool off Amazon. And I'm going to show you a couple different options. So we have a heat gun, we have a crimper for doing some of the auxiliary stuff, just some wire snips, some scissors for the shrink wrap. With doing battery cables, what we like to use here at DRSC and Tuned by Shawn is crimper. You can buy this from Haltech. This is a hydraulic crimper. I believe they're around $80 or somewhere in there. But if you want something a little bit more simple, this is something you get at your local hardware store. Essentially, you just use a hammer to crimp down the larger crimps. We also like to put loom on our battery cables and 4-to-1 shrink wrap. This just allows a nice seal, and it does help protect the cables, even though they are. This particular cable is a motorsports grade cable, so it actually has multiple layers. Very malleable, but also very safe.
I know Shawn went over some of the talking points on the actual Haltech side. I'm going to go over some of the mechanical side things. And as you can see right now, this is a drive-by cable setup. So we've got this nice billet mount on here for the drive-by cable throttle body. We're going to be switching this out with the Nick Williams drive-by wire throttle body. What that's going to do for us is that's going to allow us to have a lot better idle control and a lot better traction control that we can add in this down the road. Also, another big advantage of it is we're going to a 103 millimeter throttle body. This is just a 92 millimeter throttle body. So we are going to have a little bit bigger throttle body, which should help increase horsepower. It's not going to be a big increase, but it's pre-blower restriction, and that does make a difference on the power output of the engine. Some of the other things that we're going to be doing is taking the Holley harness off to put the Haltech harness on. We will need to change the adapter for the intake tube here because of the throttle body size change. With the drive-by-wire cable, or drive-by-wire versus the cable throttle body, we will be able to have it so that it doesn't die when the AC kicks on. Even though the Holley is currently wired for what's called an IAC kick when the AC kicks on, the IAC is slow to respond, and due to the cam size and the blower and the pulley combo, the idle on this thing can kind of be a little tricky sometimes when you're coming up to a stop and stuff. The drive-by-wire has been something that the customers wanted to do for a while, and we worked with him. We knew this was coming out. He waited patiently to be one of the first ones with the Rebel LS on it. So some of the other things that we're going to utilize with the Rebel that are already in the vehicle, but we're going to be able to control better, is this is a supercharged application. So there is a heat exchanger up here. There's a fluid pump, and we also have flex fuel on this vehicle. So we're going to be able to pin the flex fuel sensor into the Haltech just as it is with the Holley. The advantages of it versus the Holley is we don't have to wire in a resistor. We don't have to wire in, a pull-up resistor for the flex fuel sensor. It's a much more straightforward install. As someone who's installed Holleys and has been on the forums and stuff like that for years, we see a lot of people always asking the question, well, which wires do I need to do it? And there are some people that make pre-made harnesses for the flex fuel, but the Haltech just makes it that much simpler because you just run the wires and pin them into the ECU. So we do have a flex fuel sensor back there. It is a Radium inline flex fuel sensor. And then we have a Bosch 010 intercooler pump down here that we are going to wire into the Haltech to control it as well. And that will control the pump flow based on the coolant temperature and stuff like that. Because of the customer's future goals with additional power, there were some things we had to do with making the 103 throttle body work. The stock snout we had to take off and port that to the 103 millimeter throttle body. Here we've got the billet pedal bracket for the drive-by-wire setup on here. This connects to the steering column holes in the 67 through 69 Camaros. And this is the old drive-by linkage that originally I had modified when I did the LSA swap on this car many, many years ago to accept a cable throttle body for the LSA. This one obviously no longer in there, and we have a C6 Corvette drive-by-wire pedal here.
Now that we have the Haltech Nexus Rebel LS mounted in this 67 Camaro, we can now start plugging everything in. We're going to start with the 25 amp circuit here, and we'll get that plugged in right here. And then we've got connectors A and C that we will plug in. Now that we've got those connected, we have some auxiliary items here As for the drive-by-wire pedal, I can plug this in as well. I route it over here. For now, we'll get that plugged in. We do have to wire up the brake switch still. These are going to be our auxiliary sensors that we still have to prep. And then we will be connecting, lastly, the power and ground wires with nuts. We'll do that here later. Essentially, the way this all sit here, and once we can get the harness situated so that we can get everything plugged in the engine bay. Now that we have the harness connected to the Rebel LS inside the car, we can now connect all of the accessories involved to running the engine properly and get the lengths correct without having things too long or too short. Some of the things on this harness do appear to be a little long, so we'll be tidying up the harness inside the cab and tucking it away so you can't see it, and so the engine bay looks great. Okay, we're going to set up the Haltech Rebel LS. So we're going to first start off with the NSP software, and you can open that up. I generally like to start with a fresh screen with nothing else on it, and we can plug in the USB.
Where can they find Haltech NSP
At
software?
haltech.com. And so we're going to be setting up the wizard here. It starts off with vehicle name. All you have to do is put in the vehicle name. You don't have to put the description in. If you wanted to do a description, things that you'd put in there is like the size of the injectors, information about the engine. This is the 67 Camaro. And then you hit next. And now we need to find the engine in the list here. And then we'll hit next. Mild. Okay. And that is the drive-by-wire we are using. And this is the map sensor that we're using as well. So now the injectors that we are using are different. If we type in ID 1050, we can select that as our injector. These are the coils that we're using. And now, essentially, it's prompting us to turn on the ignition to start the setup checklist. So this says test failed. I'll have to look into that, but we'll continue for now. We're going to do the calibration for the drive-by-wire. One moment here. 100%. Okay, that was good. And now we need to calibrate the drive-by-wire. You can hear it moving. Okay, the calibration was good. Everything passed. What we're going to do is, normally you could start the car. We had chosen to add an additional wideband so that we could tune each individual banks. So at this point in time, we are going to set that up. CAN connections here. Go to the Haltech CAN system. We're going to enable the WB1. Haltech, for some things that you do change, generally for adding different modules and that type of stuff, we do have to reset the ECU. And now we'll have to add the additional wideband by going to our wideband section. We are using the internal wideband as well. And so that's our sensor 1. And we are going to enable the secondary sensor. And we are going to assign that to, in this case, it's going to be, I believe, bank 2. And this one is going to be bank 1. And then we are going to need to choose the wideband, which here it is. It is registering. Now in this particular application, because we are using 2 widebands, we do need to define what each wideband means to the ECU so that it can then effectively trim each side of the engine. Regardless if you get this correct or not correct, what you can do is that you will observe if you have it incorrect and you look at the short-term fuel trims, they will be opposite of each other. So one will go to +10, one will go to -10. Generally what that means is that you simply have your wideband sensors flip-flopped and you can simply choose the different bank option in the O2 controls, or you can go to the sensors and switch them around as well. So there's multiple different ways to resolve that problem, other than having to go and physically switch them around. So this particular car is going to be a flex fuel vehicle, and so we do have a flex fuel sensor installed on this car. We wired it to the auxiliary connector for sensors on SPI 1, So we'll need to go to sensors and enable it here in the software. And we did assign it to SPI 1. These are Hall effect sensors, so we do need to enable the Hall effect option and then cycle the ECU. And then we'll see as the ethanol percent increases. And we can pull up a gauge to show what it's at. And we are at 65% currently, which is what our winter blend here is in Minnesota. Now that we've enabled the flex fuel sensor, there is an additional sensor that we added. It is the fuel pressure sensor. So we're going to enable that here in the software. Now there are some generic settings here. It did choose the sensor designation already, but we are going to change that because this sensor is a 100 PSI sensor. And our fuel pressure is at 62 PSI. So now that we know that information, what we'll do here is we do need to add that information here, 62, and then we also do need to tell the ECU that it is going to be a flex fuel running vehicle as well. So it takes the ethanol percentage in the fuel calculation. So we've enabled the flex fuel type here, and it did give us a warning that there is essentially the selection for the table isn't being used as a option because obviously this base map and the configuration is new. I suspect that there's not that many flex fuel vehicles that have been done so far. So what we do need to do is edit this table, and by doing that we're going to type in flex fuel and hit OK, and then hit OK again, and the warning will now go away and our corrections will be applied appropriately to the fuel map. I'm seeing that in the software we do have a firmware update available. I would not encourage that if your car has been fully tuned to just always upgrade the firmware. Sometimes there are changes that do affect things. So that's something, if you are tuning your car yourself, just be aware of that so that you can make adjustments, or you may want to speak with your tuner first to make sure that the update doesn't affect anything that has been done previously. But since we've not started this car, we're going to upgrade the firmware now. And as you can tell, based on other engine management systems, the firmware upgrade process is by far significantly easier than other applications. Okay, now everything has been fully updated. At this point, I don't see any of the reason that why we can't start the car.
We have the first Rebel LS installed here at DRSC. The overall install, much simpler than a Holley setup, especially with this vehicle. We went from a drive-by cable to a drive-by wire. We added flex fuel, we added fuel pressure, we added a secondary O2, so it's got dual channel widebands for both banks. That allows us for individual bank fuel trimming. We had to take the Holley out and install the Rebel, but overall this was far easier than a lot of the other ECU brand installs that we've done. They made it very easy with all the additional connectors you needed for different things. It comes with 2-pin and 4-pin alternator connectors, which is huge because some of the competitors, you have to buy an extra piece just to get your alternator to charge and get your motor to run or your engine to run, but you can't get your alternator to charge without an additional piece. Came with the LSA style Gen 4 map sensor plug, which some other manufacturers sell as an additional part. I didn't need adapters for the injectors. It came with the correct injector plugins on it, which typically with the other ones you can order the correct injector sub-harness as well. This is a sub-harness on this. But overall, just very, very easy setup. I really liked it.
So now that the car is running, we do have some cleanup to do here. We've been working all day on this project. Started roughly around 10:30 this morning. It's 1:30 in the morning right now.
We've done an alignment on the car. We took the Holly out, put the Haltech Nexus or Rebel in.
We had to take the blower out, port the blower. So it's been a long day. So there are some things that we need to fix and finish. So the things that we have to finish is we do have to wire in the vintage air AC. We also have to wire in the pump for the supercharger. We have to finalize the alternator wiring. We have to fit the intake. The fan also will need to be cleaned up on the wiring. Inside the car, we do have to connect the Dakota Digital Haltech CAN module that will make all of the factory gauges in this beautiful 67 work just as how they are intended to. And beyond that, it's just simply cleaning up the wiring, making it presentable for the customer. And then at that point in time, as long as the road conditions are good, we can go for the first drive.
After the first drive, we'll get this thing back on the dyno, see what kind of power it makes. Obviously, with the bigger throttle body and the ported snout, we should pick up some power right there. And having dual wideband control and drive-by-wire, the drivability should improve drastically. So we're looking forward to that. That was, the biggest customer complaint coming into this was at idle control was really hard, especially with the AC on in the summer. The car would die sometimes. This should solve all of that.
We appreciate you guys watching this episode.
We also want to give a shout out to Patience Metal Fab. They've had their hands in this car. I originally did the LSA swap in this thing years ago, and Patience put the Schwartz chassis under it. They did a phenomenal job. Having the Schwartz chassis under it actually made it a lot easier. There's a lot more room underneath the car to get some of the wiring done. So we just wanted to give those guys a big shout out, and
we really appreciate them.